Greetings. In this video, I want to tell you about a former adult student of mine, and for our purposes today, I'm going to call him Mike. Mike came to me several years ago. He was a retired professional in his 50s, very successful, and he was genuinely intelligent. Mike was fairly well read, he was politically engaged, he kept up with all the news. He even thought of himself as an educated person, and I would say that by every conventional standard, he really was. But Mike came to me with something that he couldn't quite name. He was trying to describe it as a sense of restlessness, maybe even a mild state of acedia. But closer to his own words, he said he had a feeling that for all his education and all his success in life, he still felt oddly empty. Now, if you talk to Mike, you would see that he's full of trivia, full of facts, full of information, and yet he was somehow starving spiritually and intellectually. Mike could discuss almost any current event or political policy with confidence, but he couldn't talk about any of the deeper questions with any certainty at all. Now, there was more to Mike's struggle that included his parents' history and how that influenced his thoughts about his own identity. And so we decided to read C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity together. Normally, I might have started with St. Augustine's Confessions, but due to some of the details surrounding his personal circumstances, I thought it might be better if we started with someone whom we could rightly qualify as a native of Old Western culture, but was someone also more contemporary. And I think that suited Mike's particular needs. In any case, we read C.S. Lewis together, and it was his very first time, and every single week we met for nearly a year. And we had deep and candid conversations. And amazingly, Mike was transformed by the experience. And he repeatedly expressed his surprise for the way all of Lewis's insights manifested the entire Christian intellectual tradition, and yet somehow touched on just about everything Mike felt was wrong with his life. And what I would say is that what Lewis knew, and what the entire classical Christian tradition knows, is that the human soul has a specific shape, that it's ordered toward particular goods, that when the loves are disordered, or when our attention is fragmented, when the imagination is malnourished, the result is not only intellectual poverty, but it's more like emotional disorientation and spiritual malnutrition. Now, I have to be sensitive with some of the details for a number of reasons, but Mike did become a Christian. He was baptized, and he continued to pursue truth, goodness, and beauty inside and outside the church. It was a marvelous transformation to behold, and I was so glad to be a part of it. Now, living in our postmodern era, I would guess that it's almost certain many of you have experienced what Mike's experiencing. Maybe you feel like you know more than you can use, or you tend to feel more than you can actually interpret. Maybe it's that you long for something you can't name. What Christian humanists of the past 2 millennia have known is that this condition is a perennial human conundrum, and yet it's fixable. It does take some deep personal reflection and lots of humility, but it's genuinely fixable. And I'm telling you this because I want to talk today about what actually changes in a person who's able to recover a robust reading life. Not just in reading the greatest book, the Bible, but also in the great books, those books that contain the best that's been thought and written for the past 2 millennia. So, in the first place, the first thing that changes is our attention. Most of us have lost the capacity for what Josef Pieper calls genuine leisure. Not talk about idleness or entertainment, but the receptive stillness in which the soul can actually receive what's being offered to it. When a person rebuilds the kind of reading habit that I'm talking about in this video, a slow, deliberate engagement with the right text, they recover this capacity to receive. Students tell me this all the time, that within a few weeks of disciplined reading, their ability to concentrate on everything else improves dramatically. And that includes their work, their conversations, and even their prayer life. Now, here's the second thing that changes. It's something Edmund Burke called the immoral imagination. And that's our capacity to perceive and respond to truth, goodness, and beauty as real transcendental things. Christian thinkers going all the way back to Erasmus and all the way up to C.S. Lewis have argued that great literature trains emotions as well as the intellect. Lectio transit mores means reading shapes moral character. It gives us categories of feeling adequate to the reality we inhabit. And when that faculty is cultivated, a person begins to see things differently. They read passages of Scripture and something opens up to them. They hear a piece of music and it means something it didn't mean before. They make decisions with a kind of clarity that they didn't know that they had. And that leads me to the third thing that changes, and it's perhaps the most surprising. Real community. The reading life is not solitary. The great Christian humanists like Augustine, Erasmus, Thomas More, C.S. Lewis, J.R. Tolkien, the Inklings, they all understood that wisdom's formed in conversation. When you find yourself in a room, even a virtual room, with others who are asking the same questions, reading the same texts, wrestling with the same ideas, something happens that you can't name, something that can't happen alone. You discover that you're not the only one who's felt this restlessness. You discover this tradition's much richer than you knew. And you discover, and often with some relief, that you're not too late to get in on it. In a few days, I'm going to share with you the very specific structure, the 6 weeks, the text, the assignments, the community, of what I called in the last video the Christian humanist reading life. And I'm going to show you exactly what we're going to do together, how it's going to work, and why I think this particular sequence is designed to produce lasting change, not just some temporary burst of intellectual enthusiasm. But before the next video, I'd love to know what would change for you if you had a genuinely ordered intellectual life. What might be different about, say, your marriage, your parenting, your work, your faith, your hobbies? Leave an answer in the comments if you would, and I'm asking seriously. I'd really like to know, and I'll try to respond to as many as I can. I hope to see you soon in the next video. God bless.